a lot of people are really good at creating that kind of content. What we do for them is we actually provide an outbound channel to get in front of the exact target audiences there. Because we can, what I call right size, because we basically have reduced the cost structure, we have basically the exact targets that customers are looking for. So whether you're in the, looking for human resource professionals, whether you're looking for supply chain professionals, whether you're looking for product managers, whatever it is you're looking for, we can put your content marketing in front of those exact target people.
Welcome to Business Ninjas, brought to you by WriteForMe, where you'll hear from business leaders who are out there growing their business and slaying it every day. Learn from the masters. Let's get started.
Hey everybody, welcome back for another episode of Business Ninjas. I'm here today with Robert Flynn. He's the CEO and co-founder at Aggregage. Robert, welcome to the show.
Hi, Kelsey. Thank you.
Excited to have you today. So, Robert, why don't you start and tell me a little bit about yourself?
So I'm a multiple-time entrepreneur. Everything I have done has been at the intersection of technology and the media entertainment world. From the mid 80s to the mid 90s, actually was a partner in a venture capital firm who we were the first firm on the West Coast with that investment focus. But I had always really wanted to go on the other side of the table, the entrepreneurial side. And so I've now started 4 companies. The first one was a company called Liquid Audio that was the pioneer of digital music distribution. And like I said, then everything else, a company in the video space, one sort of in the allied in the over-the-top television space, and then now this company, Aggregage.
That's so interesting. So tell me a little bit more about the name Aggregage and kind of how the company came about.
So the concept here is Aggregage is a mashup of 2 words, aggregate and engage. What we do is we aggregate engaging content in the B2B space. So the opportunity that we saw was that since the demise of print trade media, there hadn't really been kind of any institutionalized form for B2B media. There were a few big companies that kind of replicated the traditional model. They built staffs, writing staffs, they built editorial staffs, and they went into a few niches, and then their distribution was entirely online. And then in most verticals, there are a lot of, what I'll just sort of call mom and pop shops, just sort of one-off sites that pretty much what they do is they just repurpose press releases and write about that kind of news. So we didn't really think that's what people wanted to read about. What they really wanted was the kind of thought leadership content that would help them do better in their jobs, and would really kind of give them insight as to where the industry that they're in is going. And so that's the opportunity set that we saw.
That's so interesting. And would you say, for the reasons that you've been able to capitalize on the market, those are the reasons that, really differentiates Aggregage from its competition?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that there are people that are doing things that are in the same vein, but there's nobody that's doing what we do.
Yeah.
So what distinguishes us, like I said, there are traditionally sort of content-driven companies that are creating a lot of content through editorial and writing staffs. What we do is we aggregate, we find in any given vertical, we find those people who are thought leaders, the high-level executives and consultants in a field who are writing primarily through a blog about the issues they see in the industry. And we have typically, we have on average about 125 different content sources feeding us that content every day, every week. And so we have literally hundreds of pieces of fresh content, high level, good quality thought leadership content. The one human part of our process is that we're very picky about what content sources we include.
That leads me to a question, and I think you tapped on it a little bit, and you kind of got my gears going. So in today's digital age, there's an overwhelming amount of information available, and I think you touched on that a little bit. So talk to me about how Aggregage helps businesses kind of cut through the noise and find that relevant content to talk about.
Okay, so there's actually two kind of information overload questions there. Let me kind of address the first one that just comes to me, which is really on the audience side, the reader side. So the way we help readers figure out what the best content is, we have built a series of intelligent algorithms. My partner was the original CTO of eHarmony, a guy who's used to building very big data-driven algorithms in order to create relevance. So what we do is we look at the social media and reading signals of anybody who's reading any of the content in our system. They don't have to be reading it on our sites. They can be reading it on the blogger site. They can be reading it on social media, wherever they're reading it. But in essence, in any given vertical, we utilize those signals in order to curate the content. So if you come to the site or you get the newsletter version of it, it's prioritized according to what the audience is telling us is the best. And similarly, there's a newsletter version that also does that. But also, these algorithms actually look at every individual reader and suggest content, put forth content that is most related to them. So that's cutting through the noise for the readers. So the other part of it, the question you asked was cutting through the noise for the companies. The way we make money is that we generate leads for companies that are in a particular vertical, trying to sell into a particular vertical. And most of what companies invest an incredible amount of money in content marketing, as you probably know. Given WriteForMe's business, I suspect you know that very well, probably better than I do. And the main reason they're doing that is they're doing what I like to call playing the SEO game. They're trying to bring people to their sites. The issue, as you probably know, is that, and as you're alluded to for the question, a lot of people are really good at creating that kind of content, and it's still hard to get people to come to their sites. So what we do for them is we actually provide an outbound channel to get in front of the exact target audiences they're looking for. Because we can, what I call right size the publications, our verticals, I also call them content communities, because we basically have reduced the cost structure of implementing those. We have basically the exact targets that customers are looking for. So whether you're in the, looking for human resource professionals, whether you're looking for supply chain professionals, whether you're looking for product managers, whatever it is you're looking for, we can put your content marketing in front of those exact target people. And then if they're interested, that generates leads for you, for the company. So that's how we deal with cutting through the noise for both sides of the equation.
Yeah. And you mentioned too, targeting specific professionals, when you're working with them, and you mentioned, targeting kind of any different vertical. Do you tend to see different industries or verticals that tend to work with Aggregage more than others?
Well, we have some that are bigger from a financial standpoint right now. But the whole premise behind the company. So we have launched or are in the process to launch well over 100 sites so far. Our goal is literally 1,000 sites. And the theory behind the sort of business theory behind this is we don't want to have to figure out what's the best vertical at any given time from a financial standpoint. We're playing kind of a horizontal portfolio game with all these vertical channels. So, and we've seen, one of our best sites before COVID was a site in recruiting, aimed at recruiters. It completely died during COVID because nobody was really hiring. I mean, that just wasn't. So so yes, we have some sites that have traditionally performed well, but really we think all the sites can perform at a pretty equal level, given the audience size. That's where they're going to differ. They're going to differ by audience size.
That's really interesting. And I'm curious too, kind of to pick your brain in with your experience that you do have. Do you hear a lot of common misconceptions or things that people think may be a certain way that aren't actually the way?
There's sort of a gamut of things that I would say are kind of not horrible misconceptions, but just, somewhat, not understanding. I think that what people don't understand is that a lot of the other sources of lead generation out there really take advantage of a real mashup of content. So if you look at some of the companies that are providing intent leads, really what they're doing is they're aggregating from hundreds, if not thousands of different locations, this activity. Well, what one of those sources thinks is in a certain industry or related to a certain piece of software in an industry may not be, their keywords may be different from another company's keywords. The other thing is that they're generating these leads from people who maybe saw an ad, not even necessarily clicked on it, but may have come up. They may have read a story, but there's not really that detailed a sense of information about them. And in fact, it's all based on IP address. So all they're really understanding is that there's a company. Mm-hmm. They don't know who those specific people are. They're not really drilling down into, the real people that are exhibiting potential buying habits. And that's part of what we help fight.
Makes sense. It's a good spot to be in.
Yeah, we think so.
I think we'll stay. Well, Robert, as we start to wrap up this conversation, is there anything that you want to leave our listeners with, either about Aggregate, about the industry, anything you want to leave our listeners with?
Boy, that's a big question. I think that when here, I'll just sort of address something that's topical.
Yeah.
Generative AI is a sort of topic out there. And certainly I think there's a place for it in the right instances. Mm-hmm. I think that nothing will replace the true thought leadership of the actual practitioners in an industry. I don't think you can kind of assemble, as I understand how these, large language model technologies work, you can certainly create content, but I think, look, our career, for every one of us, for better or worse as Americans, we're driven by our careers, is an important part of our lives. And I think that what anyone wants, I'm taking the audience, our audience perspective, because we really have multiple stakeholders here, is you want really good information about your company. And that was always what trade media was about. And I think, that's what we've tried to replace, is really open and expressing different viewpoints. We don't try and, we have partners. We generally have a partner on every one of our sites. It's usually a trade association or something like that. And they said, well, we want to make sure that the content you're putting out is, we're okay with it. And we're like, okay, are you going to review 200 stories a day? And then they're like, well, we don't want to. And we're like, hey, conversation is good. That's really kind of the sad thing that's going on in our society, is there's not enough really open conversation. So that's part of also what we see is like, put reasonably thought through content out there, mm-hmm. and everybody can learn from it. So I would say that's my, that's sort of one takeaway from what we're doing.
I really like that. I think that's an interesting point too about, making sure that, not everyone necessarily has to agree with the content, it starts a discussion and it creates engagement and helps drive traffic to your website so you can work to educate more, drive leads, and really, encourage engagement, like I said.
Yeah, and like I said, we view in with any company, obviously your customers are one of your stakeholders. Our audience is one of our stakeholders. Our the bloggers who, we have almost 12,000 different content sources feeding us content. They're one of our, and then obviously all the employees of our company are huge stakeholders in the company. But it's, my belief has always been, whenever I've sought to create a startup, there has to be a value proposition for all the stakeholders. And that's what I look for and what I'm trying to deliver.
Absolutely. Well, Robert, this has been a great conversation. I appreciate you breaking the time, to talk about the industry, talk about trends that you've seen, the hot topic of AI. Really appreciate you being on Business Ninjas today.
All right, Kelsey, thank you.
Yeah, great to have you.